Okay, everyone, welcome to March 10th Java Operators Community Meeting. Reminder that this meeting is being recorded and one day will end up on the internet, so please be kind to one another. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Do we have any new faces? Judging by the attendee list, no. Okay. The first one that's on the agenda that I wanted to talk about was, so next week, the US starts daylight savings time. So March 13th, we will move our clocks an hour ahead. I believe Europe does not move at least for another 2 weeks. So that means if you're using the meeting invite that I created, then it should show up fine on your calendar. But if anyone copied it, it may be off. So just a reminder. The last time we did put the clocks back, we had a whole bunch of folks miss it because it was off an hour. So just a PSA. Next item. So there was a patch made to Java Operators plugins. I did a release of 0.30. In retrospect, I probably should have done 0.21, but oh well. What's a version number? And so that got released, and I created PRs that got merged into the operator SDK. So master got merged, and there was one also for V1. There was also one for the V118. So I believe Ish volunteered to do a release of that today. So thank you, Ish, for that. So then 118.1 will go out with the patch. Today, the reason we have to do this is there was a incompatible Quarkus version that came in, and when you tried to run the Maven dev, it breaks. So that was fixed. So that's why we need to do the point release. That's all I had. Does anyone else have a community interest or some announcement?
That release should be out by 1 or 2 p.m. Pacific time today. So this afternoon, if anyone needs it.
Okay. Yeah, any time today is good. So that's perfect. I was going to try to squeeze it in between meetings this morning, and then I realized, no, that's not a good idea.
Yeah, babysitting CI between meetings sounds like not a great time.
No. Plus 2 other things came in, so I was dealing with those.
Yeah.
Okay. If nothing there, then let me check out the issues. Okay, the one that came in last week from Christoph, which, yes, we definitely need to do that. So I did reach out to the Helm folk, the hybrid Helm, to see what they were doing. I believe they were doing manual scaffolds, so we may have to investigate how to solve this one. I know how to do it if we did it in SDK proper, but I think we're trying to get them so that it happens in the repo where the plugin is. So, okay. Okay. So Java Operator SDK, we've got Flaky integration test.
There was an issue with one test, but it was actually a bug. I think I fixed that. So and we will kind of turn off this flaky feature. It basically will fail all the tests if something fails. So Yeah, that's fixed. Basically, will be reviewed and meshed probably soon.
Consider moving default configuration service and annotation controller configuration into core module.
Yeah, that's actually done. Not sure. Yeah, the pull request is merged. I don't know why the. Oh yeah, because the yeah, that's done on the next branch, so it doesn't automatically close the issue.
Shall I
When
close
it
it?
doesn't, yeah, it's done. Thank you.
That's kind of the best way to look at a GitHub issue. It's done. Okay.
Yeah, this one is probably gonna get closed because I'm working on a different solution. I actually don't know what's gonna happen because the other solution is annoying. So basically, the issue is that we have a concept, a class that's called configuration, an interface that's called configuration service that provides, as it names it implies, information about configuration. I mean, cluster-wise, but like things that pertain to the operator at the operator level as opposed to a specific controller's configuration. And the problem is that it kind of percolates all across the code. So we have lots of methods on lots of classes that try to retrieve the current configuration service when really that object is really, I mean, it should be a singleton, I mean, a single entity that is available across the application. And the proper way to fix that would be to have some kind of dependency injection framework so that it gets injected where it's needed, and the dependency injection framework would take care of doing the actual injection. And since we don't have a dependency injection framework wired in the SDK as of now, it gets a little messy. So yeah, one solution to fix at least one aspect of the problem was to introduce, which is that specific issue, to introduce an interface for objects that need to either get the configuration service injected or are able to provide it somehow. Because in some cases, we need to be able to iterate over all those objects. And like, for example, if you, on an aggregate object, you set on the aggregate object that contains children objects, you set the configuration service on the parent, then you would want to propagate that configuration service down to all the children. But since the children could be implemented as different, I mean, could be heterogeneous classes, if you don't have an interface over them, then you can't really. Sorry, my cat is getting nuts with a box. I'm not sure why, but that's a cat. So Yeah, so yeah, but it basically provides that issue was about having a generic way to deal with those kind of objects that need to get the dependency, the configuration service injected. Another approach that I'm currently trying out, but I was hoping that it would be quick, is to get to kind of have that singleton provider of a configuration service that would be basically something that's globally available statically across the application. But that has its own set of issues, because as soon as you have global variables, basically, then you have state that can be mutated pretty much everywhere, and you need to track that state. And so it's actually, I'm not sure that the mess I'm currently creating is actually, I mean, is actually a good direction. So yeah, I'm really not sure what's gonna happen on that front yet. Sorry about the messy details.
Oh, no, that's fine. That makes sense.
So yeah, to sum up, that issue might get closed or might get revived. I don't know at the moment, because I'm trying to. I've started to pull on a tiny wool thread, and it's. I'm afraid it's gonna be attached to a big rock that's gonna fall on my head. So.
Yep, this is what one of the guys on our team mentions, the onion bomb. You open it up and all of a sudden it just keeps on layers and layers. And it's like, I wonder where this is going to end.
Yeah, and so right now I have been trying to get the test to run, and as soon as I fix one, it's basically I am playing whack-a-mole at the moment. So it's not the kind of work that I enjoy, but it needs to get done. So I'm.
Yeah, when you're in those whack-a-mole modes, it's when you start to think, is this really a good idea? Let's see.
That's the stage I'm at. So I'm considering the nuclear option at the moment.
It's like, okay,
so
cut it.
Let's get rid of all the moles all at once.
Yep. No, I've been there.
Just one comment on this, Chris, that should be this the configuration service or the controller configuration?
No, it's the configuration service in this case.
Okay.
The controller configuration is pretty well handled, I think. At least I haven't run into issues with it.
Because I just issued a pull request which moves the controller configuration, replaces the configuration service to controller configuration in the context objects, because first of all, you can access the configuration service from a controller configuration, and that's I think the good direction in a reconciler, because yeah, I mean that's the specific configuration for that reconciler, and plus you can access the generic one. And it's I wanted to make sure that if you create a dependent resource, a standalone, and you don't so you don't configure it with some managed resource configuration or something like that, then you just inherit the namespace what is the controller is watching. So it won't watch the whole cluster, but just the same.
For oh yeah, you mean for the non-managed?
Yes,
case,
for the
right?
non-managed.
Because that's already handled for the managed case.
Yes, but I noticed in the standalone integration test that this is what's happening. It watches the whole cluster, then it's very confusing because you see a whole bunch of deployments running and other resources which are managed there. So just maybe take a look on that, and if it makes sense and how it relates to this issue, probably not, but just mentioning that.
Yeah, I mean I don't know. I mean right now, the idea I'm working on is to have something called configuration service provider, and it's globally available and you can get it from anywhere. So yeah, but it's and yeah, that whole thing started with the Quarkus extension actually, because when the Quarkus extension processes a controller's configuration, the controller's configuration needs to get tied to its configuration service parent. But the problem is that when that happens, for Quarkus, it's the configuration service is built after the controller's configuration, and with the dependent stuff, it's getting a little tricky. And it's actually inconsistent because some of the dependent implementation is not getting the right information depending on how it's configured. So it's a problem. And that's actually, that problem actually exists independently of Quarkus. It's just the way that the Kubernetes dependent resource config works. And actually in the non-managed state, that dependent configuration is not required. In the managed state, it's always created, so it's fine. But in the non-managed state, since it's not required, it might get created with default values, and the default values are wrong. I mean, it's not that they're wrong, but they can be wrong depending on, because basically those default values don't get access to the configuration service. So it's a little tricky because the configuration service is used for lots of different things. And so one aspect of what it's being used for is used by the dependents, but it's like way down the rabbit hole. So it's kind of a mess, unfortunately.
Okay, I really don't see this now. So yeah.
Configuration is always nasty.
Well, especially if you try to make it so that that people don't need to do it explicitly. If you try to make it so, if you make your users say exactly what they want explicitly, then it's fine. But as soon as you're trying to make them do less work, then you have to make assumptions, and very often those assumptions come back to bite you. So that's the case here.
Cool. Thank you. Oh, configuration. Make controller configuration get dependent resources more generic.
Yeah, this is well, it's done in a pull request, but it hasn't been merged yet.
Okay, so there's a PR open.
Yeah, because I created that issue, and then because I was having some issue with stream operations that were not getting the proper types, and then I figured out that in that specific instance, the issue wasn't coming from that method. But then I ran into a different problem where the problem was actually that method. So that's why you can see I opened the issue, and then I closed it, and then I reopened, because I'm like, okay, first I thought I needed it, then I thought I didn't need it, and then I realized that, yeah, I do need it. So hopefully it's fixed. But yeah, we need to merge that PR.
This one looks like it's another PR that's open. Error when adding multiple event sources.
This, I think this is closed.
Oh,
Yeah.
it is merged. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same problem that like most of the stuff that affects the next branch doesn't get closed automatically.
It's fair.
Sometimes I think about closing the issue manually, but very often I don't. So this one I kept open because it's fixed. Well, it's not really fixed. It's let's say it's a non-issue that affects. It's basically if you try to connect to a cluster that uses certificate that is encoded using elliptic curves encryption.
Mm-hmm.
The Fabricate client cannot connect to it. And the fix is to add a dependency. It's an optional dependency. And you add a dependency to your project, and then you basically get the elliptic curve encryption.
Bouncy castle.
Yep.
Gosh, I haven't seen that in years.
And so that, I mean, we could, so it's a little annoying because you need to know that you need to add that dependency. It's the reason why the Fabricate client doesn't use that dependency by default is that it's because it's a pretty heavy one.
Mm-hmm.
And since Fabricate is already quite heavy and used in Quarkus, it's a tricky issue. But might think that we might want to revisit that. I don't know. Because, for example, it's, I mean, Rancher desktop is getting more and more popular, and that issue is happening with them. It's basically anything that uses K3D or K3S. I'm not sure which one it is. Yeah, there's a similar one, and I actually commented on it that rang a bell, and that maybe that was the issue. But I'm not sure what Minikube is using as far as encryption goes. So maybe it might be a different, maybe a different dependency to add. I don't know. But apparently, adding the dependency didn't fix the problem.
Okay. Oh, so Bouncy Castle didn't help them.
No, it did, but they had
caching.
Yeah, well, I don't know exactly what was happening, but yeah, the dependencies didn't get refreshed properly, so it wasn't taken into account initially. So I kept it open, maybe to document it as part of an FAQ or something like that. I'm kind of thinking that we might want to implement that support directly in the Fabricate client. There are ways to do it without using Bouncy Castle, but obviously that means that you need to maintain that implementation. And since it's kind of security sensitive, it's I mean, you have to make sure that you know what you're doing. It's always more comfortable. It's obviously more comfortable to rely on a library that's tested than just wing out your own implementation and think you can get it right.
Yeah, especially with certificates.
Yeah.
No, I think keeping it open makes sense for now. Support for wait for a resource state condition.
Yes, I mean, this is just, I wanted to start working and kind of a prototyping for the managed dependent resources, how we are going to describe a workflow. And for that is, I think, linked in this issue and the description. It's actually not wait for, it's actually a condition that needs to happen before something goes to the next step. If you click on this issue on the 850 in the description, maybe that will be clearer. So here is that we define a list of dependent resources, and we say that, okay, we want to have this just reconciled if these certain conditions are met for the other resources. Like, for example, a deployment is up and ready to receive some API calls or something. And basically there was then debate if we need a synchronized version of that. And for now, it seems to be, it would create more confusion than it would help. And so basically there would be, as it stays now, there will be no sync waiting in a reconciliation. That means we just always check a condition and either pass to the next step or return from the reconciliation, wait for the next event to trigger the reconciliation. But this was just a prototype. How would the object model work? And we'll probably continue with the try to lose, not sure time-wise, because we probably want to have a release before this is actually implemented. But we'll continue to prototyping this feature. And yeah, that was the first step.
Cool. Okay, so we'll leave that alone. Any others we need to discuss, or you got labels on these?
Yeah, Chris, I will have time tomorrow probably. Maybe I can take this if you are working on something else. I think this is the last issue and the Quarkus part to release the dependent resources. Maybe some others.
Yeah, maybe I'll give up on the. Maybe I'll just do a quick fix for Quarkus, because the problem, the configuration stuff, the configuration service stuff started because I was experiencing problems implementing the dependent resources with the Quarkus extension. So I need a fix for that specific issue. But the problem is that I don't know right now if I'm not going to find any other issues. So that's why I thought several times, okay, let's just release what we have right now, but we might still need to break the API depending on how the Quarkus implementation goes. But yeah, I get.
No, I mean, I can just prepare the docs to the next branch and basically just to work on this. But if you want to still reserve this for yourself, then I'm fine with that.
No, I mean, we can do it collaboratively. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Like you can start and I can add more stuff. And I mean, if you have time to work on it, I didn't mean to put an exclusive lock on it.
Okay.
So
no, I maybe just prepare the. Yep. So maybe I just prepare the skeleton and how will I continue, and then we can briefly discuss it.
Yeah, sure.
At both of you, why not? Error handling. This one doesn't have any labels at all. Discussion around a condition needs API abstraction. Okay.
Yeah. I admit I haven't had time to look at it. My brain capacity is as its max. It's already. I mean, it's pretty low already, so it's like maxed out at the moment. So
yeah, I just briefly took a look on it, but so the conditions are very even debatable. I think it was one time it was planned to remove it. Even I remember.
Yeah, it's if you look at the Kubernetes API best practices, or I don't know. I mean, it's on GitHub. It's like the status thing, the status part with the condition. It's been going back and forth all the time, and it's not clear what I mean, if you read that document one day, you might come up with okay, that's the way to do it, and then you look another day and it's a different solution. So it's
and yesterday somebody posted a recent article on the Slack of Kubernetes operators. I think it was very interesting, but to be honest, I don't agree with everything that's said there. Maybe I will post here in the chat. No. Or maybe even to the issue. So in case you can take a look on it and comment on this issue or regarding to, or as a comment this link it that issue. But it basically, I think this is very interesting topic in general. I'm not sure if we want to explicitly support it or how, but if it's not something very complex or very hard to implement, we can take a look and try to support it.
In the Go framework I developed, I had something like that where dependents could basically specify, okay, what is the ready state for the dependent, and then you can go. I mean, you had ready, error. So the primary resource reconciler could retry stuff on the failed. So yeah, it's tricky. It's definitely something we need to have an opinion on. I think maybe the opinion is that we stay out of it, and that would be fine. But yeah, people will ask for it, I think. So we just need to figure out what we want to do, if anything.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I agree.
I know that the operator framework has conditions. I can go look to see and just make a reference to this so you have another data point. I want to make sure it's the same type. Updating status sub-resource without an update control.
Yeah, it's basically someone wanting to presumably because their reconcile loop is long, I assume, or the reconcile takes a long time. They want to update immediately the custom resource status to say, okay, the controller has started working on it and it's doing its thing, but they want to update the status immediately so that they can let the user know that something is happening. I assume that it's because it's taking a long time, and I agree that from a user's perspective, very often when you work with Kubernetes, you start to do things and then nothing happens, and you don't know what's going on, and most of the time you just have to wait. But being able to have immediate feedback would be interesting, but the problem is that if you do it directly, then you get possibly conflicts on the resource.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know if we should close this issue or we want to explicitly support this somehow. Probably not.
I would say no. I mean, this seems like common use case and problems. And if his reconcile is too long, then what you suggested about just using the client.
Yeah, but that actually doesn't work. That was my naive answer, but that doesn't work, because if you use the client directly in the reconcile loop, then you get a resource conflict because you modify basically the resource twice in the same reconcile loop.
I see what you're saying.
But then you can use that returned resource and use that in the update control. So
yeah.
It's I mean, so the question is if we should explicitly somehow support this, and for me this seems to be a very exotic use case, like having this multiple times executed the update in one reconciliation. It doesn't really fit in the philosophy that reconcile is a function and the output is basically the status. Why would we update the status multiple times in the whole reconciliation? Yeah, it's really,
yeah, I mean, maybe the solution for that is that once the first time you see the custom resource, you update the status and you don't do anything else and you return immediately. And so the users know that something's happening at least. And then you trigger an immediate reconcile again. I don't know. But I mean, I agree from a user friendliness perspective, it would be nice to be able to know that based on to be able to update the status of the custom resource immediately so that people know that the resource is being handled. Because if the reconcile function is long, nothing might happen, and you might be wondering, okay, is it working? Is it not working? And that's a common problem when working with Kubernetes, because you apply your file, your resource to the cluster, and then you have to wait. Nothing happens, and I mean, stuff happens, but you don't see it, and sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. So, oops, sorry.
Was that your cat or you?
That was me this time. And so, yeah, it's from a user friendliness perspective, it makes sense. From a reconciler implementation, it doesn't. But yeah, so I don't know, it's a balance to be found.
That's fair. One other thing that I've found is that often folks will come to the Operator Framework SDK to ask questions, and they may be trying to do something in their reconcile loop that we don't necessarily recommend, and often trying to recommend or show them a different way and get them used to doing the updates differently can help. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to kind of know why they were doing this. Some folks are doing more complex things because they truly do need some more complexity, and others do it because they're used to writing it in a certain way and not used to this whole reconcile loop mechanism. And once they see a better way of doing it, they're like, okay, well, that's probably a better pattern. So as long as we probably just want to keep aware of when folks write these issues so that we can guide them and be a little more, what's that, prescriptive?
Yeah, opinionated.
No, that's opinionated. That's the one I was thinking.
Opinionated, yeah. But yeah, definitely. But see, in that use case, I think that use case makes sense, though, that you want to be able to tell your user immediately that your resource is taken care of. It might take some time, but it's taken care of, as opposed to the default experience where if it's your reconciliation takes a lot of time, your users are basically left hanging. It's like, okay, I applied my resource, but it's still not I mean, nothing has happened yet, so it can be frustrating, and I think that contributes to the frustration that some people have with Kubernetes, because you don't get that immediate feedback.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
So I'm not sure what the proper, but I completely agree that we should guide people towards good patterns, but I'm not sure what the good pattern would be in that case to address that user friendliness issue. Because I mean, the same thing, you might want to, I mean, with the same kind of use case, if it takes really a long time, you might want to return, to update the status of your custom resource immediately, say, okay, it's being handled, but you might also want to do it periodically to let people know that it's not hung. So like basically kind of the progress bar, a progress bar going on.
Exactly.
That's the kind of, it would make sense for people to see that there's actual progress going on. And that's part of also why there's like people talked about conditions in the status, so that you could kind of split the kind of operations that your reconciler is doing into steps, and so each steps can get validated with the condition in the status, and people know that at least part of the work has been done, and that work is actually going on, instead of having to wait forever to realize that, because basically the user doesn't, if you don't update the status, the user doesn't know what's going on, and as a user it's really frustrating.
Yeah, that's fair. And when you don't know what's going on, you often will get impatient and do things like, oh, let me delete this and recreate it, and that just causes it to take longer.
You don't know if it maybe it's just long. It just takes whatever much time it takes, but if you don't know that it's still working, because sometimes you're just waiting and nothing happens because it's just broken, so you might wait forever and it will never work. But if you don't have some kind of progress status going on, then you never know if it's working or if it's just broken. So that for me, that use case makes sense. I just don't know what's the appropriate way to deal with that use case. Yeah, I haven't looked at that one either, but probably should.
Okay. I'll leave it untriaged for next time. Okay. I'll go back. I've got 15 minutes. Oh, there was a thing last time about scorecard testing, and we didn't talk about it, so I put it here. I put the links anyway for how we're doing it in the operator framework, and there is actually a scorecard plugin that adds the scorecard config to the it adds it to the configuration directory, which gets pulled into the bundle. But what it does need, so scorecard needs a config, and in that config it specifies the image that it wants to test, and calls out the test. Let me find the actual sample.
So for supporting the Java operators with the scorecard, I think in the theory is that existing scorecard tests, like that have been written in Go or whatever else, you can use them to test your operator as long as it has access to the cluster. And I think the like really valuable thing we can do on the Java side is provide documentation and write a sample for writing custom test images for scorecard in Java, because I think then the folks who need to develop Java operators who want custom tests beyond the scope of the existing like basic OLM and like verification tests can write them in a language they're comfortable with. And we already have support for all of this. It's just a case of kind of sitting through and learning how the custom image works and reading the doc for that thing. And I can put together like some, I guess, more detailed stuff than probably exists on our custom image documentation.
Yeah. But this here is a scorecard config. An inside test scorecard in the bundle. Scorecard can use this and run the tests that are being called out. And you give it an image and the actual test suite. So, I mean, that's the beginnings, but we can definitely documenting how to write custom ones. And I know Brett from our PE team actually wrote a custom scorecard test in Java. Maybe next time.
Yeah. I was actually going to reach out to him to see if we could use his image as like the base for the sample, because it's a pretty good base, like custom image. Like you can pretty much fork it out to build whatever you want on top of Brett's.
Yeah, he usually attends this call. Maybe next time you can kind of give a quick rundown of like some of the challenges, if any, and how we could best use that. So now, Christoph, were you getting folks asking about this specifically or just curious?
It's more from our own curiosity, but
Okay.
I think, I mean, that dovetails into the certification kind of discussion going on with Operator Hub, and I'm not sure exactly where Scorecard sits into that whole process actually. If it's part of the maturity level evaluation at all or not. But yeah, it's my problem is that I have a very fuzzy understanding of the whole environment at the moment. So I'm just trying to explore a little bit and get things on my radar so that I know when eventually people will be asking for it, I have some kind of rational answer, or at least semi-educated one.
Yeah, I know that like from the operator framework SDK, there are two sets of like validations that I've seen used for things that go into Operator Hub. There is a bundle validate command that gets run when you make the bundles, and that will, one of the checks can be Operator Hub, and it will check a variety of things that Operator Hub expects your bundle to have. And then there are scorecard tests that there's some basic tests in there that we include. Those are more not necessarily specific to Operator Hub. I have heard folks write custom ones in order to do a specific check that they wanted to do. Scorecard was intended to kind of help you write to test your operator, kind of because it runs it in a cluster, and you can do both validation of your bundles and the functionality of your operator. And I have heard folks in QE looking at writing their tests, custom tests for Scorecard, so that they can test the operators as well. Because there's folks that, there's different testing that happens, and Scorecard's yet another layer. You've got folks that are writing unit tests so the operator authors will often write unit tests. They may write some ETE tests that just kind of, hey, I'm going to run the code here locally on my machine and kind of run through a set of not external, but integration. And then Scorecard, sometimes they will write those so that it can deploy into a cluster, run it as it's alive in the cluster, and where you get a different behavior and verify things. And then the QE folks who are not they're not necessarily part of the operator's team, but they are in charge of testing it. Some of them are using scorecard to write tests that test those operators. So it can be used in two different ways. So, but as far as I know, there's not a specific like, hey, run this scorecard set of checks. And there was like this morning in the call, one of the topics that came up was capabilities. There has been talk about trying to use scorecard to verify capabilities and use that mechanism as a way to certify what an operator has. For instance, I want to be able to, as a level 4, you need to be able to expose metrics. Okay, maybe there's a scorecard test that runs your operator and verifies that there are metrics coming out of it and checks it that way. And that is the certified check for that. There's still some things to be decided, and it is very fuzzy. So it's not surprising that you have a fuzzy view of it. We do too. Okay. Did anyone else want to have anything to talk about in the last remaining 7 minutes? I will remind, yes, the US is moving next week, starting Sunday. So the meeting, if you're on this meeting invite, it'll move automatically, but if you're using a mental model like I usually do for this morning meeting, it may shift for you in Europe.
Yeah, I'm not sure when we are switching.
I think you guys, Europe says, last when I looked, it said
Yeah.
March 27th.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
So it'll be, there's like 2 weeks. Yeah.
Okay.
So if nobody shows up in the next 2 weeks, that's fine. I know why.
Yeah. Well, most of the folks on the call are in the US anyway, so I guess here, at least for today.
Yeah.
Apart from Attila and me, I think.
Yeah, sometimes Adam will show up and then and others. So, all right. Well, if nothing else, I will go ahead and call it here and have a good rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Same to you. Take care.
Bye.